I was 68 years old when I discovered my own son had hidden his wedding from me, celebrating it in the same house I had bought for him while telling relatives I was too sick to attend. That morning, scrolling through social media, I saw the photos. My son David beaming in a tuxedo, his new wife Sarah elegant in white, and all our family gathered in the backyard of the home where I still paid the mortgage. The same home where, just days before, they had told me they were just having a small dinner party. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, but it wasn't the secret ceremony that broke my heart. It was seeing my sister Helen in the photos, the same sister they had told me was too busy to visit, when I asked to invite her over. They had orchestrated an elaborate lie, turning my entire family against me while living under my roof, using my money, and treating me like a shameful secret to be hidden away. But before we continue, if you've ever felt the sting of family betrayal, if you've ever been treated like a burden by the very people you sacrificed everything for, leave a like on this video and subscribe to hear what happens next. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because this story will show you exactly how karma works when you least expect it. My name is Robert Anderson, and I spent 40 years building a successful construction company from nothing, working my way up from apprentice carpenter to CEO, all to give my son the life I never had. After losing my wife Margaret to cancer 5 years ago, I thought David was all I had left. I thought my generosity had bought his love. But that morning as I sat staring at those wedding photos, something else caught my eye. A document I had almost forgotten about, filed away in my home office. A document that would soon remind my son and his new wife that the house they were so proudly using for their secret celebration wasn't as securely theirs as they thought. They didn't know it yet, but their perfect wedding photos would be the last happy memories they'd make in that home. But to understand how we reached this moment of betrayal and revenge, we need to go back. Back to the day my son first brought home the woman who would turn him against his own father. I started my construction company with nothing but a used pickup truck and a borrowed toolbox, working every job myself in those early days. The smell of sawdust and fresh paint became my constant companions as I built my reputation one project at a time. Margaret, my wife, kept our books from our small kitchen table, her careful handwriting tracking every dollar we earned while raising our son David. We lived in a tiny rental apartment back then, saving every spare penny to buy our first piece of land. Those were hard years, but they were also filled with a special kind of joy that only comes from building something together. The business grew slowly but steadily, from small home repairs to residential developments, and finally to major commercial projects. Margaret had a way with clients, her warm smile and honest manner winning their trust while I handled the technical details. She taught David his first words sitting on my lap during client meetings, her free hand drawing little houses on notepads to keep him quiet. One memory stands clearer than all others. David's 10th birthday when I took him to his first construction site. I can still see him standing there in his oversized hard hat, his eyes wide with wonder as I showed him how to read blueprints. Margaret had packed us lunch in a red cooler, and we sat on stacked lumber eating sandwiches while I explained how buildings rise from empty lots. One day, son, I told him, all of this will be yours. He hugged me so tight that day, his small arms barely reaching around my work jacket. That moment, that simple perfect moment of father and son sharing dreams under an open sky, became my compass for everything I built afterward. The company flourished over the next 3 decades, growing into Anderson Construction Group, one of Chicago's most respected developers. We moved from that tiny apartment to a beautiful home in Lincoln Park, sent David to the best schools, and built the kind of life I had only dreamed of as a young carpenter. Margaret's cancer came swiftly and without warning 5 years ago. She fought hard, her spirit strong even as her body weakened, but within 6 months she was gone. The house fell silent. The family dinners ended. David, busy with his own career in finance, visited less and less. I threw myself into work, taking on bigger projects, expanding the company, trying to fill the emptiness with blueprints and contracts. But every night I came home to empty rooms filled with memories. Margaret's favorite chair still angled toward the window, her gardening books untouched on shelves, her coffee mug exactly where she left it that final morning. I kept everything the same, as if preserving her space might somehow preserve her presence. The business thrived, but success meant little without her to share it. David's occasional visits became my only real connection to family life, though even those felt increasingly rushed and obligatory. I told myself it was natural, that he was building his own life, that I needed to give him space to grow. I filled my days with work and my evenings with quiet routines, finding a kind of peace in solitude. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, David called with unexpected news. "Dad," he said, his voice unusually excited, "I met someone special." Her name is Sarah Mitchell. She's a real estate agent and I really want you to meet her. Can we come over for dinner tonight? Sarah Mitchell arrived at my door that evening wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than my first month's salary as a carpenter. Her smile was practiced, perfect, the kind real estate agents use to sell overpriced properties to unsuspecting buyers. She brought an expensive bottle of wine and complimented everything in my house with the precision of someone who automatically calculates square footage and market value. "What a charming home," she said, her eyes scanning the high ceilings and hardwood floors. "The original moldings must be worth a fortune." I noticed how she emphasized worth, as if testing the waters. David watched her every move, hanging on her words like a teenager with his first crush. I prepared Margaret's special pot roast recipe, setting the table with our best china, hoping to make the evening special for my son's sake. During dinner, Sarah asked questions that seemed innocent but left me slightly uncomfortable. "This neighborhood has appreciated so much lately. Have you ever thought about downsizing, Mr. Anderson? A man living alone in such a big house." She let the sentence hang while David nodded along, as if this was a perfectly normal dinner conversation. When I mentioned the company's latest projects, Sarah's eyes lit up with an intensity that didn't match her polite smile. "Commercial real estate development must be so profitable," she mused, touching David's arm. "Especially with all these new zoning changes." I watched my son transform before my eyes, becoming someone I barely recognized. He interrupted me to correct small details about projects I'd managed before he was born. He dismissed my concerns about a risky new development area, saying, "Dad's a bit old school about these things, Sarah. He doesn't understand modern market dynamics." The same son who once proudly wore a toy hard hat now acted embarrassed when I mentioned our humble beginnings. After dessert, while I was in the kitchen getting coffee, I overheard Sarah's whispered words to David, "Your father's company has so much potential. It just needs younger vision." Something in her tone made my hands shake slightly as I carried the coffee cups. When they left that evening, Sarah hugged me with theatrical warmth, her expensive perfume lingering in the air like a warning sign. "We should discuss the company's future soon," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I have so many ideas for modernization." David didn't notice my discomfort, too busy gazing at her with blind adoration. In the weeks that followed, I saw less and less of my son. When he did visit, Sarah was always with him, steering conversations toward business valuations and property markets. She found subtle ways to make me feel outdated, using terms like legacy thinking and traditional methods, as if they were polite insults. David began canceling our regular Sunday dinners, always with excuses about networking events Sarah had planned. He stopped asking for my advice about work, instead forwarding Sarah's suggestions about company restructuring. One evening, as I sat alone in my quiet house looking at old photos of David in his first business suit, proud and eager to learn the family trade, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Something was changing, shifting beneath the surface like foundation cracks that appear slowly but threaten the entire structure. My son was slipping away, being reshaped by hands that seemed to have plans for more than just his heart. The first incident happened at the company's annual board meeting, a tradition I had started 30 years ago. I arrived early as always, carrying the financial reports I had carefully prepared. Sarah was already there, standing at the head of the table where I usually sat, presenting her own sleek digital slides about modernizing our brand identity. David stood beside her, nodding enthusiastically. "Dad," he said with forced patience, "we didn't want to bother you with the presentation prep. You know how stressed these meetings make you lately." I sat quietly in a side chair, watching decades of business experience dismissed as outdated thinking, telling myself they were just trying to help, that maybe I was becoming too set in my ways. The second blow came during Thanksgiving dinner at my house. I had spent hours preparing Margaret's recipes, wanting to honor her memory and welcome Sarah into our traditions. But when I brought out my wife's cherished turkey platter, Sarah wrinkled her nose. "Oh, we actually ordered catering," she announced as David sheepishly carried in boxes of gourmet prepared food. "We didn't want you to strain yourself in the kitchen at your age." My hands trembled as I put away the platter that held 30 years of family memories. I forced a smile, repeating in my mind that they meant well, that change was natural, that I should be grateful they were thinking of my well-being. But the sight of Margaret's untouched recipes sitting in the kitchen while we ate strangers' food broke something inside me. The final cut went deepest, during what should have been a happy moment. I had discovered old photos of David's first construction site visit and created a special album for his birthday. When I arrived at his house to deliver it, I heard voices through the open window. "Your father's getting so clingy," Sarah was saying. "All these old pictures and memories, it's like he's living in the past." David's response shattered my heart. "I know, it's exhausting. Sometimes I wish he'd just focus on his retirement and let us live our lives." I stood there holding the album, each photo now feeling like evidence of a relationship that existed only in my memory. The gift remained in my car, never given, while I made excuses about having a business meeting and left quickly. That night, alone in my house, I pulled out the old photos myself. Images of a small boy looking at his father with pure admiration, of a young man eager to learn the family business, of proud moments shared between generations. When had that son disappeared? When had I become a burden instead of a father? I tried to rationalize their behavior, to find explanations that would hurt less than the truth. Maybe they were right about me living in the past. Maybe I was holding too tightly to old ways of doing things. Maybe love sometimes meant stepping back, even when every step felt like walking on broken glass. But sitting there surrounded by memories no one wanted anymore, I finally admitted what I had been avoiding. I was losing my son. Not to natural growth or normal life changes, but to a calculated campaign of subtle cruelty and constant belittlement. The house felt colder than ever that night, filled with an emptiness that echoed with unspoken words and unanswered questions. The same home that had once bustled with family love now felt like a museum of abandoned memories, each room a reminder of relationships that were fading like old photographs left too long in the sun. The news came on a bright spring morning when David called, his voice carrying an excitement I hadn't heard in months. "Dad, Sarah and I are having a dinner party next weekend. Just a small gathering at the house, nothing fancy." My heart leaped at the simple invitation, the first in what felt like forever. I immediately offered to help with the expenses, grateful for any chance to be involved in my son's life again. "That's very generous, Dad," he said, sounding almost like his old self. "We could use some help with the catering." I wrote a check for $5,000 that afternoon, delivering it personally to their house. Sarah accepted it with her perfect smile, talking about table arrangements and flower choices. For the first time in months, I felt included, wanted part of their lives again. I spent the week looking forward to the event, pressing my best suit, even buying a new tie that Margaret would have approved of. The possibility of reconnecting with my son filled me with a hope I hadn't dared feel in a long time. But 3 days before the dinner party, I stopped by their house to drop off some old family recipes Sarah had surprisingly asked for. The front door was slightly ajar and voices drifted out to the porch. I heard Sarah speaking in low, excited tones. "Everything's arranged. The minister will do the ceremony in the backyard. Your father's check covered the flowers and catering perfectly." My hand froze on the doorknob as David replied, "Are you sure we shouldn't tell him?" "He's going to find out eventually." Sarah's laugh sent chills down my spine. "Tell him what? That we're using his money to fund the wedding he's not invited to? He'd just make it all about him, crying about your mother and trying to take over the planning. Better to let him think it's just a dinner party. By the time he finds out, it'll be too late." My son's voice, hesitant but compliant. "I guess you're right. He has been pretty clingy lately. And the relatives already think he's too sick to attend, thanks to your calls." I backed away from the door, the recipe cards falling from my trembling hands. The betrayal was so complete, so carefully planned, that my mind struggled to process it. They weren't just excluding me from my only son's wedding. They were using my own money to fund their deception. They had called our relatives, spreading lies about my health, ensuring no one would question my absence. The weight of their betrayal pressed against my chest like a physical pain. That night, I barely slept, torn between confronting them and playing along to see how far their deception would go. I thought about Margaret, about how heartbroken she would be to see our son treat family bonds with such casual cruelty. The next 2 days passed in a blur of painful clarity. I watched them make preparations, accepting deliveries, arranging chairs in the backyard, all while maintaining their charade of a simple dinner party. Each time they mentioned the upcoming gathering, the lie felt like another knife in my heart. I could have exposed their plan, could have called the relatives myself to reveal the truth, but something deeper held me back. A cold, quiet voice inside me whispered that sometimes the best revenge is letting people think they've won, while silently preparing to show them exactly what they're about to lose. The morning of their secret wedding arrived sunny and clear, as if nature itself was unaware of the betrayal about to unfold. I dressed carefully in my suit, knowing I wouldn't actually attend but needing to maintain the pretense until the last moment. As I adjusted my tie in the mirror, I caught sight of my reflection. A man who had given everything to his family, only to be treated like an embarrassing secret to be hidden away. But behind the pain in my eyes, there was something else emerging. A steely resolve that would soon remind my son and his bride that actions have consequences. I picked up my phone to text David that I was feeling under the weather and wouldn't make it to the dinner party, playing one last time into their elaborate lie. The response came quickly, filled with fake concern and poorly hidden relief. As I sat in my quiet house, knowing my family was gathering without me just blocks away, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. They thought this was the end of the story, their perfect plan executed flawlessly. They had no idea it was just the beginning. Despite texting that I wouldn't attend their dinner party, something drew me to drive past their house that evening. I parked a block away, my hands tight on the steering wheel, and watched as cars filled their street. Relatives I hadn't seen in months arrived dressed in their finest clothes, carrying wrapped gifts and flowers. My sister Helen, who they told me was too busy to visit, walked up their driveway in a beautiful blue dress, the same one she'd worn to David's college graduation. Through the gaps in the fence, I could see their backyard transformed into a wedding venue. White chairs lined up in neat rows, an arch covered in the expensive flowers my money had paid for, fairy lights twinkling in the early evening glow. The same backyard where I had taught David to play catch, where we had built his first treehouse together, now became the stage for their ultimate betrayal. I stepped out of my car, drawn closer by some masochistic need to witness their deception firsthand. The gate was open, and I slipped silently into the back of the gathering crowd. No one noticed me at first, all eyes focused on the makeshift altar where David stood in a tuxedo, beaming with happiness. The string quartet, another expense covered by my generous dinner party contribution, began playing the wedding march. Sarah appeared in a stunning white dress, walking down the aisle created between our family members, all of them smiling, none of them questioning my absence. The minister began speaking about love, trust, and family bonds, each word feeling like acid in my ears. Then I heard my sister Helen whisper to our cousin John, "It's so sad Robert couldn't be here." Sarah said his dementia is getting worse, that he barely recognizes David anymore. The shock of their lie made me gasp audibly, causing several guests to turn around. The recognition rippled through the crowd like a wave. Aunt Mary's hand flew to her mouth. Uncle James started to stand. David's eyes met mine from the altar, widening with a mixture of guilt and anger. Sarah's perfect composure cracked for just a moment before she grabbed David's arm possessively. The minister faltered in his speech as the whispers grew louder. "Isn't that Robert? I thought he was in a nursing home." "He looks perfectly fine to me." My son's face transformed from shock to something harder, colder, as Sarah whispered urgently in his ear. Then David did something that sealed our fate forever. He nodded to the security guard they had hired for the event, the same one who had been checking guest names at the gate. "I'm sorry, sir," the guard said, approaching me with professional detachment. "I'll have to ask you to leave. The bride and groom didn't include you on the approved guest list." The humiliation burned through me as my own family watched in stunned silence. Some looked away in embarrassment, others stared openly, but none stepped forward to defend me. Sarah's smile had returned, triumphant and cruel, as she pulled David closer to her. My son, my only child, the boy I had given everything for, stood silent and complicit as I was escorted from his wedding like an unwanted stranger. I walked slowly down their driveway, my back straight, my steps measured, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing me run. Behind me, I heard Sarah's voice, bright and false, asking the minister to continue the ceremony. The music resumed, life went on, as if the father of the groom hadn't just been thrown out of his own son's secret wedding. I got into my car and sat there, listening to the muffled sounds of celebration drifting through the evening air. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the joyful music, all paid for with my money, all celebrating a union built on lies. In that moment, as the sun set on the remnants of our relationship, something crystallized inside me. The warm, forgiving father who had always made excuses for his son's behavior died in that car. In his place emerged someone colder, someone who finally understood that some betrayals can never be undone, some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. I started my car and drove away from the celebration, leaving behind not just a wedding, but every illusion I had ever held about my son's love for me. The door to forgiveness slammed shut in my heart with the finality of a tomb being sealed. I returned to my empty house that night, my legs barely carrying me through the door. The silence felt different now, heavier, filled with the weight of complete betrayal. I couldn't bring myself to take off my suit, the one I had so carefully pressed for their fake dinner party. Instead, I wandered through the rooms like a ghost, touching Margaret's photographs, wondering what she would say if she could see what our son had become. In my study, I mechanically began opening drawers, not searching for anything specific, just needing to keep my hands busy to stop them from shaking. That's when I found it in the bottom drawer of my old filing cabinet. A thick manila envelope, its edges worn with age, marked David's house original documents in Margaret's neat handwriting. Inside was the property deed to the house where my son had just celebrated his secret wedding, along with a stack of legal papers I had almost forgotten about. The deed was printed on heavy cream-colored paper, its official seal still clearly visible after all these years. But what caught my eye was the ownership structure Margaret had insisted on when we bought the house for David 5 years ago. She had been sick then, already knowing her time was short, and she had made me promise to protect myself just in case. The house had been purchased through a family trust, with a specific clause that maintained my controlling interest until I chose to transfer it. David had never read the fine print, too eager to move in to care about legal details. Sarah, for all her real estate expertise, had assumed the property was already in David's name. My hands stopped trembling as I read through the documents, each page revealing more of the power I still held. The mortgage payments I had been making, the property taxes I had been covering, all of it carefully documented in Margaret's meticulous records. Even the recent renovations they had done for the wedding were technically improvements to my property. A cold clarity began replacing the numbness in my chest. The same house they had used to humiliate me, the same backyard where they had celebrated their deception, the same rooms where Sarah had plotted to take my company, none of it truly belonged to them. I spread the papers across my desk, my mind suddenly sharp with purpose. The deed, the trust documents, the payment records, they weren't just papers anymore. They were weapons, perfectly legal and absolutely devastating. I thought of Sarah's smug smile as I was escorted from the wedding, of David's silent complicity, of their calculated lies to our family. They thought they had won, thought they had successfully pushed me out of their lives. But they had forgotten the most basic lesson I had tried to teach my son. Always read the fine print. I carefully returned the documents to the envelope, holding it with the reverence of a soldier gripping his sword before battle. Tomorrow they would wake up as newlyweds, believing they were secure in their victory. They had no idea that with one signature, one legal filing, I could turn their dream home into their worst nightmare. The envelope felt heavy in my hands, weighted with possibilities and consequences. It wasn't just ink and paper I held, it was justice waiting to be served cold and precise. Margaret had given me one final gift, the power to teach our son that every betrayal has its price. I placed the envelope in my briefcase, my movements deliberate and calm. The broken father who had been humiliated at his son's wedding was gone. In his place stood a man with the legal right and moral authority to deliver a lesson they would never forget. The documents were simple pieces of paper, but in my hands, they had become something much more powerful. They were the key to showing my son and his bride exactly what it feels like to lose everything you thought was securely yours. At exactly 8 o'clock the next morning, I called Thomas Wheeler, my lawyer of 30 years and the man who had helped Margaret set up the property trust. He answered on the first ring as if he had been expecting my call. "I saw the wedding photos on social media," he said quietly. "I've been waiting to hear from you." We arranged to meet at his office immediately, in the same downtown building where we had signed the original trust documents. Tom's office hadn't changed in 3 decades. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs worn smooth with age, and walls lined with law books that had witnessed countless family dramas. I placed the manila envelope on his desk, watching as he examined each document with the methodical precision that had made him Chicago's most respected family lawyer. "Margaret was brilliant," he said, adjusting his reading glasses. "This trust structure is absolutely ironclad. The house, the property, even the recent improvements they made for the wedding, it all legally belongs to you through the family trust. David's occupancy is essentially a month-to-month arrangement that you can terminate at will." He laid out the papers in precise rows on his desk, creating a battle plan of legal documents. "What's more," he continued, "since they used the property for a commercial event without the trust's permission, technically they violated the terms of use. The wedding itself gives us grounds for immediate eviction." I sat straighter in my chair as Tom outlined our strategy. First, we would file for immediate termination of occupancy, giving them exactly 30 days to vacate. Simultaneously, we would submit claims for compensation for unauthorized commercial use of the property. The timing would be crucial. The papers would be delivered while they were still on their honeymoon, ensuring their first days as newlyweds would end with the realization that their dream home was about to be taken away. "They'll try to fight it," Tom warned, but his smile suggested he welcomed the challenge. "Sarah will probably claim verbal agreements, implied ownership, all sorts of legal maneuvers. But everything is in writing, every payment documented, every term clearly stated. They don't have a legal leg to stand on. He pulled out fresh forms, his pen hovering over the signature lines. The only question is, Robert, are you absolutely sure you want to do this? Once we file these papers, there's no going back. Your relationship with David will never be the same. I thought about my son's silence as I was escorted from his wedding, about Sarah's triumphant smile, about their elaborate web of lies to our family. The relationship is already gone, Tom. They killed it themselves. Now it's time for them to learn that actions have consequences. Tom nodded, understanding perfectly. He had seen enough family betrayals to know when reconciliation was impossible. We spent the next hour preparing everything. Eviction notices, property claims, legal declarations, all perfectly worded and absolutely binding. When I finally signed the last document, Tom gathered them with the satisfaction of a general whose army was perfectly positioned for battle. I'll file these first thing tomorrow morning, he said. They should receive the notices by courier within 3 days. Do you want me to handle all communication going forward? I stood up, feeling taller than I had in months. No, let them try to call me. Let them realize that the father they thought was so weak, so easily discarded, held the power to destroy their perfect life all along. Tom walked me to the door, placing a supportive hand on my shoulder. Margaret would be proud of you, Robert. Not for the revenge, but for finally standing up for yourself. I left his office that morning feeling something I hadn't experienced since finding those wedding photos. A sense of complete control. The same house they had used to exclude and humiliate me would become the instrument of their harshest life lesson. The father they had treated like a burden was about to become the most powerful force in their lives, and this time, there would be no negotiations, no second chances, no forgiveness. They had chosen their path, now they would walk it all the way to its bitter end. The legal notices were delivered exactly 3 days into David and Sarah's honeymoon in Hawaii. Tom's courier service confirmed delivery to their hotel's front desk at precisely 10 o'clock in the morning. I sat in my study, watching the clock and imagining the scene. Their perfect breakfast interrupted, the thick legal envelope placed in their hands, Sarah's confident smile fading as she read the first page, David's face draining of color as he understood what the documents meant. The eviction notice gave them 30 days to vacate the property, the commercial usage claim demanded compensation for using the house as a wedding venue, and the trust documents proved my complete legal ownership. Their paradise was about to crumble, one official paper at a time. The first call came within 20 minutes. I watched David's name flash on my phone screen but didn't answer. 10 more calls followed in rapid succession, then a flood of text messages, each one more desperate than the last. Dad, there must be some mistake. Please call us back immediately. We need to talk about these papers. Sarah's number appeared next, then messages from her. This is completely unreasonable. We can work something out. You're ruining our honeymoon. I smiled at that last one, remembering how they had ruined their own wedding by excluding me. By noon, they had cut their honeymoon short and booked emergency flights home. I knew this because Tom's office called to inform me they had demanded an immediate meeting. Let them stew, I instructed. Don't schedule anything for at least a week. More calls poured in throughout the day, from Sarah's father, from my sister Helen, from various family members who had attended the wedding and were now hearing the true story. Each message revealed the unraveling of their carefully constructed lies. Why didn't you tell us about the secret wedding? We had no idea they had excluded you. How could David do this to his own father? By evening, Sarah was sending emails threatening legal action, claiming tenant rights, demanding negotiations. Tom forwarded each one to me with simple notes. No legal standing. Trust is ironclad. They have no case. I sat in my favorite chair, Margaret's picture on the table beside me, listening to my phone buzz with their increasing panic. The same people who had thought me too weak and outdated to attend their wedding were now discovering just how much power I still held. The final message came at midnight, a long text from David. Dad, please. We just got home. The house is our home. We're newly married. You can't do this to us. I read it several times, savoring each word. The son who had watched in silence as I was escorted from his wedding was now begging for mercy. The house they had used to humiliate me would no longer be their home. The life they had built on lies and betrayal was collapsing, and I felt nothing but a cold satisfaction. I turned off my phone, poured myself a glass of whiskey, and enjoyed the quiet of my victory. Tomorrow they would wake up to the reality that they had 30 days to find a new place to live. They would realize that every renovation they had done for the wedding had legally belonged to me. They would understand that their perfect new life was built on a foundation they didn't actually own. But most importantly, they would learn that the father they had dismissed as weak and irrelevant had been strong enough to let them fall. I raised my glass to Margaret's picture, knowing she would understand that sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their choices. The silence in my house felt different now, no longer heavy with sadness but peaceful with the weight of justice being served. After setting the legal wheels in motion, I decided to disappear completely. I packed a small suitcase with basic clothes, took Margaret's photograph from my desk, and booked a flight to our old vacation spot in northern Michigan. The lakeside cabin where we had spent our early anniversary still stood, rustic and peaceful, far from Chicago's chaos. Before leaving, I wrote a simple note and left it on my kitchen table. Gone fishing like Margaret and I used to. Don't bother looking. You'll find me when I want to be found. I knew they would eventually come to my house, probably thinking they could persuade me in person, but they would find only silence and that cryptic message. The drive to the airport felt like shedding an old skin, each mile taking me further from the betrayal and closer to something like freedom. The small propeller plane that flew me north carried just 6 passengers, reminding me of simpler times before David's ambitions and Sarah's manipulations had poisoned our family bonds. The cabin appeared exactly as I remembered. Weathered wood walls, a wraparound porch facing the crystal-clear lake, and absolute silence except for nature's music. No cell phone signals reached this sanctuary, no urgent messages, no desperate pleas from a son who had forgotten how to be a son. I unpacked my few belongings, placing Margaret's photo on the stone mantel where morning sunlight could touch her smile. The cabin's previous owner, an old fisherman who had understood the value of solitude, had left his gear hanging on the porch. The familiar weight of a fishing rod in my hands brought back memories of teaching David to fish in this very lake, back when he still looked at me with respect instead of embarrassment. That first evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching trout jump in the lake while sunset painted the trees gold. The local general store owner, Jenny, remembered me from years ago and asked no questions when I bought supplies. She simply said, "Some folks come to the mountains to find something, others come to leave something behind. Either way, the mountains keep their secrets." Her words captured perfectly what I was doing, leaving behind the pain of betrayal while finding my own strength again. Each morning, I woke with the sun, fishing in the cool mist, enjoying meals I cooked myself on the old wood stove. The simple routine felt like healing, each day washing away another layer of hurt. I thought about David and Sarah, imagining their increasing panic as the eviction deadline approached, their frantic calls meeting only silence, their perfect plans crumbling while I found peace in this quiet place. Sometimes, hiking along crystal-clear streams, I imagined Margaret walking beside me, approving of this peaceful revenge, this dignified response to their cruelty. Jenny brought weekly supplies and local newspapers without prying, though her eyes held knowing sympathy. "Your phone's been ringing at the store," she mentioned once. "Lots of messages from Chicago." I nodded, understanding that my disappearance was causing exactly the uncertainty I intended. While they faced the chaos of finding a new home, explaining to friends why they had to move, dealing with the social embarrassment of their lives being exposed, I was finding a different kind of wealth in this simple cabin. My note about "gone fishing" had been more than a message, it was a declaration of independence from their toxic world. Here, surrounded by ancient trees and honest silence, I discovered that the best revenge wasn't in watching their destruction. It was in finding my peace while their carefully planned world crumbled into chaos. 3 weeks into my mountain retreat, Jenny brought more than just supplies. She carried a thick envelope from Tom Wheeler containing newspaper clippings and legal updates that painted a picture of David and Sarah's spectacular downfall. The eviction was proceeding exactly as planned, but its effects had rippled far beyond just losing their home. Sarah's real estate clients had begun dropping her when the story spread about her deceptive wedding and treatment of her father-in-law. Her carefully crafted image as a trustworthy agent shattered when people learned she had failed to understand basic property ownership of her own home. David's investment firm placed him on temporary leave after several important clients, longtime friends of mine in the construction industry, withdrew their business. Their perfect life was unraveling thread by thread. Tom's letter detailed their increasingly desperate legal maneuvers. Sarah had tried claiming common law ownership rights, attempted to challenge the trust validity, even suggested that I was mentally unfit to manage the property. Each attempt had been swiftly dismissed, with judges expressing clear disapproval of their behavior. The local society pages, which had once featured Sarah's real estate success stories, now whispered about the couple's rapid fall from grace. Their honeymoon photos, posted with triumphant captions about their perfect life, had been deleted from social media, replaced by rumors about heated arguments overheard through their soon-to-be former home's open windows. The moving trucks appeared exactly 28 days into their 30-day notice, not to deliver wedding gifts but to pack up their belongings. They had found a small apartment, a significant downgrade from the house they had thought was theirs, and far from the prestigious neighborhood they had used to build their social status. Sarah's father, who had once supported their lies about my health, now refused to help them financially, disgusted by their treatment of me. The final blow came when their wedding photographer, having learned the true story, shared photos of my forced removal from the ceremony. The images spread through Chicago's social circles, transforming their elegant wedding into a symbol of their cruelty. Their relationship began showing cracks under the pressure. Tom reported overhearing Sarah blame David for not reading the trust documents more carefully, while David accused her of pushing him to exclude me from their lives. The perfect couple who had once plotted so confidently against me now turned on each other, their unity crumbling like the foundations of the house they had to leave. Through it all, I remained in my peaceful cabin, watching trout leap in the crystal lake, letting karma do its work without my presence. Their world was burning, but I felt no need to watch the flames up close. Jenny brought one final update as their eviction date approached. They had been seen arguing in public, Sarah screaming about ruined opportunities, David looking lost and broken. The same country club that had hosted their wedding reception now quietly removed them from its membership list. That evening, as I sat on my cabin porch watching the sunset, my old flip phone, the only connection I maintained with the outside world, buzzed with a message. It was from David, the first direct communication I had received since disappearing. "Dad, we're out of the house. Everything is falling apart. Sarah's leaving me. Please, I need to talk to you. Tell me where you are." I held the phone, feeling its weight like the weight of all our broken promises, all our lost possibilities. The sun sank behind the mountains, painting the sky in colors of endings and beginnings, while my son's desperate words glowed in the growing darkness. After 6 weeks of silence, I finally agreed to meet them at a small diner just outside Chicago, the kind of plain, honest place Sarah would have once considered beneath her. I arrived early, choosing a booth near the back where I could watch them enter. They appeared exactly at the arranged time, but they were barely recognizable as the confident couple who had orchestrated my humiliation at their wedding. David wore wrinkled clothes that hadn't seen an iron, his face unshaven, his shoulders slumped under the weight of consequences. Sarah's designer outfit was gone, replaced by simple department store clothes, her perfect makeup absent, revealing dark circles under her eyes. They spotted me and walked slowly to the booth, like prisoners approaching their sentence. "Dad," David's voice cracked on that single word. I gestured for them to sit, maintaining the calm demeanor I had cultivated during my weeks of mountain solitude. The waitress brought coffee, her presence creating a momentary buffer against the emotional storm about to break. Sarah spoke first, her hands trembling around her coffee cup. "Mr. Anderson, what we did was unforgivable. I destroyed everything out of pride and ambition." David couldn't meet my eyes, staring instead at the formica table where his fingers traced nervous patterns. "The apartment we're living in now, it's smaller than my first college dorm room. My investment clients won't return my calls. Sarah's real estate license is under review because of ethics complaints." Tears began rolling down Sarah's face, smearing what little makeup she wore. "My own father won't speak to me. He said what we did to you violated every principle of family and decency. The country club, our friends, everyone knows how we treated you. We're social pariahs." I sipped my coffee slowly, letting their words hang in the air. The same people who had thought themselves too sophisticated for family obligations now understood the true cost of betrayal. "We lost everything," David continued, his voice breaking. "The house, our jobs, our reputation. But worse than that, I lost my father. The man who gave me everything, who taught me everything I know about business and life. I threw it all away because I was too weak to stand up to." He glanced at Sarah, leaving the accusation unspoken. Sarah flinched but didn't argue. Instead, she pulled out a stack of papers from her bag. "These are the documents dissolving our marriage," she said quietly. "David deserves a chance to rebuild his relationship with you. I'm the one who poisoned everything. I'm moving back to Boston next week." I watched my son's face crumple at her words, seeing for the first time the full measure of what his choices had cost him. The diner's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on their faces, highlighting every line of stress, every tear track, every sign of their downfall. "Dad," David pleaded, reaching across the table but stopping short of touching my hand. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I can never undo what I did. But please, tell me there's some way to fix this. Some way to be your son again. The waitress returned, asking if we needed anything else. In that brief interruption, I studied them both. Sarah, already mentally packing for her escape to Boston, and David, my only child, the boy I had raised alone after Margaret died, now broken by his own choices. The same son who had watched in silence as I was escorted from his wedding now sat before me, begging for a second chance he wasn't sure he deserved. The mountain air had taught me about silence, about letting moments stretch until their own weight revealed the truth. I took another slow sip of coffee, feeling the eyes of both David and Sarah on me, waiting for my response, understanding for the first time that they were no longer in control of anything, not even their own destiny. I placed my coffee cup down with deliberate slowness, the sound of porcelain meeting formica cutting through the diner's quiet hum. Forgiveness, I began, my voice steady and firm, isn't like one of your real estate transactions, Sarah. You can't just sign papers and transfer ownership of trust. And David, our relationship isn't like your investment portfolios, where you can simply write off losses and start fresh. They both flinched at my words, but I continued without mercy. If, and I emphasize if, we are to have any relationship moving forward, there will be non-negotiable conditions. I pulled out a small notebook where I had written my terms during my peaceful mountain mornings. First, David will find his own place to live, not another property connected to me. He will build his life on his own foundation, not mine. He will work his way up from an entry-level position, no family connections, no shortcuts. David nodded, tears streaming down his face. Second, all communication will be direct and honest. No more lies, no more manipulations, no more secret plans. One single deception, no matter how small, and everything ends permanently. Sarah started to speak, but I raised my hand, silencing her. Third, David will volunteer at the Veterans Retirement Home where I first learned construction. Every Sunday for 1 year, helping elderly men who understand the value of family and honor. He will listen to their stories, learn their wisdom, and understand what real dignity looks like. My son's hands trembled as he wiped his eyes, but he didn't argue. Fourth, family events will be earned, not expected. Every holiday, every dinner, every moment of connection must be preceded by demonstrated respect and genuine effort. Trust is rebuilt through actions, not words. I turned specifically to Sarah. As for you, your decision to leave is probably the first honest thing you've done since entering our lives. When you get to Boston, remember this lesson. Status built on lies will always collapse. She nodded, unable to meet my gaze. Finally, I concluded, looking directly at David, you will write a letter to your mother's grave every month, reading it aloud there, explaining how you're working to become the son she raised you to be. I will not be present for these readings. This is between you and her memory. The diner had grown quieter, as if even the other patrons could feel the weight of this moment. David's voice came out barely above a whisper. I accept all conditions, Dad. Not because I have to, but because I need to learn how to be worthy of being your son again. Sarah stood up slowly, gathering her purse and the divorce papers. Mr. Anderson, she said softly, you are a far better man than we deserved as family. She walked out of the diner without looking back, leaving David alone with me and the consequences of his choices. The conditions start now, I said, standing up. I'll be watching, but from a distance. Prove to me that you understand the difference between having a father and deserving one. David remained seated, looking smaller than I had ever seen him, nodding in acceptance of his new reality. As I paid the bill, I heard him whisper, "Thank you for not throwing me away completely, even though I threw you away." I left him there in that booth, surrounded by the remnants of our coffee cups and the weight of his second chance, knowing that the path to redemption would be as hard as I had promised, but not impossible. Just very, very difficult, exactly as it needed to be. 1 year passed, marking each season with small steps toward healing. Sarah had disappeared to Boston, sending only a final letter acknowledging her role in destroying our family. David followed every condition I set with a dedication that surprised even my cautious heart. He found work as a junior accountant at a small firm, rented a modest apartment, and spent his Sundays at the veterans' home without fail. I watched from a distance as he rebuilt his life brick by brick, not with the flashy speed of his previous ambitions, but with the careful patience of someone who had learned the true cost of cutting corners. On Thanksgiving Day, I invited him to my house for the first time since the wedding incident. He arrived early, carrying not expensive wine or catered dishes, but a homemade pie baked from his mother's recipe. His appearance had changed, Gone were the designer suits and arrogant posture, replaced by simple clothes and humble demeanor. He had lost weight, gained wisdom lines around his eyes, and carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who had faced his worst self and chosen to change. During dinner, he shared stories from the veteran's home, speaking with genuine warmth about the men who had become his teachers in honor and respect. One elderly veteran had taught him to play chess. Another had shared war stories about brotherhood and loyalty. Through their wisdom, David had found something he had lost long ago, the ability to listen and learn from those he once would have dismissed as outdated. The most touching moment came when he showed me the letters he had written to Margaret's grave, each one documenting his journey from disgrace to gradual redemption. The pages were worn from being read aloud in the cemetery, some stained with tears, others filled with painful self-reflection. He didn't show them to impress me but to share his growth, his understanding, his genuine remorse. As we sat in the living room after dinner, the same room where he had once introduced Sarah and set our tragedy in motion, I saw small but significant signs of change. He asked about my projects with real interest, not calculating their value. He spoke of his new job with humility, proud of earning every step forward. When he mentioned Sarah's departure, there was no bitterness, only acceptance of consequences earned. Before leaving, he paused by Margaret's photo, touching it gently. "Mom would have been so disappointed in who I became," he said softly. "But I hope she'd be proud of who I'm trying to be now." I watched him drive away in his used car, feeling something I hadn't expected to feel again, cautious hope. Not the blind trust of before, but a measured acceptance that sometimes people can genuinely change when they're forced to face the truth about themselves. Looking back on this journey from my quiet study, where Margaret's photo still watches over my daily life, I've learned that betrayal and redemption follow the same rules as building a house. The foundation must be solid, the structure must be true, and sometimes you have to tear everything down to build it right. When my son and his wife excluded me from their wedding, using my own money to fund their deception, they thought they were writing the final chapter of our story. Instead, they were only setting the stage for a lesson about consequences that would change all our lives. The house they lost became more than just property. It became a symbol of how quickly things can crumble when built on lies. Sarah's departure to Boston and David's slow journey toward redemption taught me something profound. True strength isn't in the power to destroy, but in the wisdom to know when to step back and let people face the natural consequences of their choices. I didn't need to seek revenge, I just needed to stop protecting them from their own decisions. Today, as I watch my son rebuild his life with genuine humility, I understand that sometimes the greatest act of love is allowing someone to lose everything they gained through deception. It's in that loss that they find their true character, their real values, and perhaps, their way back to becoming the person they were meant to be. If you're watching this and facing betrayal in your own family, remember, forgiveness isn't weakness, but it must be earned through actions, not words. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone fall so they can learn to stand on their own 2 feet. Like and subscribe if this story touched your heart, and share in the comments where you're watching from. Let's build a community that understands the difference between enabling bad behavior and offering earned second chances. This is the Chronicler, reminding you that every story of betrayal can become a story of redemption, but only if we're brave enough to let justice and wisdom guide our actions.